This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
China records the lowest number of new coronavirus cases since the beginning of February as South Korea cases spike. US and Taliban signing historic peace deal today, and what does it mean for Afghanistan? And AU's plan to send 3,000 troops to the Sahel, how will this change the game in the region? Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Eastern Africa caught in a dilemma over locust control measures in densely populated areas. And in sports, Al Ahly take on Mamelodi Sundowns in a repeat of last year's quarterfinals. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. We begin with the latest on the coronavirus outbreak. China reported 427 new cases on Friday, a new record low for February, and nearly 2,900 patients were discharged from hospitals. The majority of new infections were in Hubei province, where the outbreak began. China's total number of cases stands at more than 79,000. Nearly half have recovered, while more than 2,800 have died. Guangdong province has reported more than 1,300 cases, followed by Henan and Zhejiang, each with more than 1,200. Outside China, more than 50 countries have reported over 6,000 cases with 86 deaths. South Korea has reported its largest daily jump in new cases, bringing the total to over 3,000. Italy has the largest tally outside Asia with nearly 900. And Iran is the worst hit country in the Middle East with more than 380 confirmed cases. Japan has more than 900. A joint COVID-19 expert team between China and the World Health Organization says all affected countries should activate their highest level of responses. Now, the team has released a report after visiting 4 regions in China, including Wuhan, where the outbreak began. The report also said that China's containment measures provide vital lessons for the global response. The team offered 22 recommendations for all countries. The World Health Organization also said there's not enough information to determine the exact origin of the virus. It also says the search for the origin can help better prevent the virus from spreading, but does not serve to put blame.
Disease can emerge anywhere. Coronaviruses are a global phenomenon. They exist on a global basis. It's an unlucky accident of history or nature that they emerge in a certain place. And it's really important that we don't start to ascribe blame to geographic origin, and that we look at this in terms of how we respond, how we contain, and how we stop this virus. I think we need to be careful in the language we use, because the language of stigma and origin and who's to blame is something that's become an unfortunate part of the global narrative, which is not helpful.
Let's head to Central Africa now. The Chinese ambassador has assured Congolese authorities of his country's commitment to help them tackle any coronavirus outbreak. CGTN's Chris Ochemringa was at the Kinshasa conference where Ambassador Zhu Jing made his remarks.
China and the Democratic Republic of Congo have had strong economic ties for decades. The two countries are now battling deadly diseases that have claimed many lives. The coronavirus has wreaked havoc in China, while Ebola, measles, cholera and monkeypox have left thousands dead in the DRC. China's ambassador to the DRC says his country will ensure that Congolese citizens living in areas affected by coronavirus are safe.
There are 110 Congolese citizens in Hubei province. 87 of them are living in Wuhan city. None of them has contracted coronavirus so far. We'll ensure they stay safe.
The ambassador also assured DRC officials of his country's commitment to end the outbreak.
Donc une des craintes majeures
The fear that many people have of contracting coronavirus is understandable, but China is doing everything possible to end the outbreak so that people continue living normal lives. We will also support the DRC in setting up measures to stop the disease from getting here.
There's no reported case of coronavirus in the DRC yet, but the Congolese government is working with international health experts to be able to detect the disease and carry out surveillance.
We congratulate the Chinese doctors and scientists who found out the cause of the coronavirus. That discovery will help us get a vaccine. We have set up an isolation centre in Kinshasa to prevent the spread of the disease if it gets here.
Officials working at airports and other points of entry have received training to identify travelers who have symptoms of coronavirus. The DRC is among 13 countries that the World Health Organization says face a high risk of getting coronavirus because of the large volume of travel with China. But authorities here are using the expertise gained in fighting Ebola to prepare for coronavirus. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Meanwhile, CGTN's chief anchor, Beatrice Marshall, has been a guest on Lunchtime News at the Uganda Broadcasting Corporation. During the show, Marshall briefed the Ugandan audience on China's latest efforts in containing COVID-19. She also talked about Africa's preparedness and the media's role in the fight against the epidemic.
Where I will point out that the World Health Organization has actually commended China on the response mechanisms, and they have said that China's response has actually set a world standard in emergency response. So yes, in terms of how Wuhan managed to contain the situation, we will take it from the World Health Organization that the response has been phenomenal. Secondly, let's see what the Chinese authorities have done up to this stage. Right, apart from just building one hospital in under 10 days, and this hospital was built to the specifications of lessons learned before from the SARS epidemic. And but they're now using newer technology to ensure that the virus does not escape, to ensure that there is minimal infection with health personnel and so forth. They built a second hospital which opened just slightly after the 10-day period. They've also built another 15 temporary hospitals within Wuhan just to deal with the epidemic. So if you can see how much effort has been put into trying to bring the situation under control. I also want to point out that, yes, as CGTN, we have correspondents inside Wuhan, all over China, monitoring the situation, giving us up-to-speed information as to what is going on inside Wuhan, but also Chinese officials themselves give us daily updates. The World Health Organization, February 10th, went into China on an assessment mission to see what was going on and then gave their feedback. And they have said this is not a pandemic. This is an epidemic. Public health officials constantly, every day, hold news conferences, press conferences to update the entire world on the new number, on the new figures, on the new Chinese efforts, on what they're going, on what is being done, on how the numbers coming down, and also to enable other countries learn from the Chinese experience and ensure that within their own borders the situation doesn't get out of control.
Let's talk about Africa and business, the economy.
Right.
How has this affected the economy one way or another from your reports?
Well, of course, trade has been affected because China is Africa's largest trading partner.
Yes.
Has been Africa's largest trading partner since 2009. There is a lot of trade going on between, apart from just the people-to-people travel. According to the African Union, over the last 10 years alone, there has been an increase in flights between China and Africa of up to 600%. So there is a lot of, a lot of
impact on trade.
Impact on trade. And of course, we know that before the epidemic is brought under control, there are certain measures that other countries have taken to protect themselves. But we know that airlines such as Ethiopian Airlines is still flying to 5 destinations in China daily. So there is still quite a bit of business ongoing, even though business has slowed down as a result. But let's also look at the new a trend that is happening in Africa, online trading.
Online trading, yeah.
Online trading is still ongoing. That has not been disrupted.
And that's not just actually in Africa. Even in China itself, businesses have had to metamorphosize themselves to the challenge. And now more online trading is coming on, deliveries, home deliveries and things like that, which is very commendable. So even Africa alone, let's put Uganda into perspective. Uganda exports goods worth over 23 million US dollars, and we import over 100 trillion of goods, 100 trillion US dollars of goods. Well, a number of people in the business community are forecasting maybe increases in prices because, you know, production might be low and then demand might spike. Yes, so what do you have to say about the demand and supply effect?
Well, we are seeing this from this week. We are seeing China talking about economic recovery. We are seeing businesses, industries beginning to operate. We are seeing countries like New Zealand talking about resumption of flights, thinking about resumption of flights, Egypt Air as well. So we are seeing the resumption of business has started inside China itself. Industries, production and related manufacturing are starting to pick up again. We also need to talk about where Africa is in all this. You know, we have about 10,000 Chinese enterprises on the African continent.
Yes.
They did not shut down. You know, business continued, work continued, even as governments took preventive measures to ensure that the virus did not arrive on African soil. The 10,000 or so enterprises on the African continent were continuing with their businesses on the continent.
Senegal has held a second course to train health personnel from the region on how to detect cases of COVID-19. Many African countries have been trying to build their capacity to tackle any coronavirus outbreak. So far, there have been only 2 confirmed cases in Africa, the first in Algeria and the other in Nigeria. A possible case in Egypt tested negative. Across Africa, 26 laboratories can now detect the virus, up from just 2 earlier this month. The training session held in Dakar was supported by the Africa Center for Disease Control, which is a technical body of the African Union. An earlier training session benefited health practitioners at the continental level, while the latest one targeted those from West African countries.
We have had theoretical training on the epidemiological aspect, on the virological aspect, but above all, on the practical aspect. These different steps are necessary to develop virus detection systems. It is important to know that surveillance without reliable detection is not reliable surveillance.
This workshop is in line with the recommendations of the Africa CDC and the African Union. African countries have been encouraged to coordinate preparedness and response to the coronavirus. It must be said that a few weeks ago, there were only 2 African countries capable of laboratory diagnosis, that is Senegal and South Africa. Today, by the end of this training, we can count about 30 African countries.
The spread of fake news or misinformation surrounding the COVID-19 outbreak is a growing concern across the world. In South Africa, for instance, media practitioners are urging people to be more careful about what they post online about the outbreak.
Generally talk about disinformation as distinct from fake news precisely because disinformation is something that's spreading false news deliberately to cause harm. And if people are doing that, that's quite a different thing from accidentally, seeing a story online and sharing it. And the short answer is this can be incredibly dangerous.
Staying in South Africa, the Soong Ching Ling Foundation has donated close to $32,000 to help China tackle COVID-19. The funds were sent to a charity in China's Hubei province. It will go towards controlling the epidemic in Wuhan, the epicenter of the outbreak. At a donation ceremony in Cape Town, the foundation expressed solidarity with China and confidence that the country will overcome the epidemic. The Chinese Deputy Consul General in Cape Town commended the work done by various charities to support China at this critical time.
But not only Nanfei Soong Ching Ling Foundation, many other Chinese communities and associations, they do what they can do to support the fight against coronavirus in China. And here I want to say, on behalf of the Chinese Consul General, I want to say thank you for the Chinese community here. And I sincerely wish and firmly believe that we will reach the final and complete success against the coronavirus.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
The United States and the Taliban are expected to sign a peace deal in the Qatari capital of Doha on Saturday. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is set to witness the signing. The deal could be the first step toward the complete withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan. Earlier, our correspondent Jack Berton gave us more details about the deal. Let's take a listen.
The details on this deal are fairly simple. As we understand it, the U.S. will announce a timeline for a full withdrawal from Afghanistan in return for guarantees from the Taliban that it will not just not harbor groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIL, but also actively seek to eradicate those groups from Afghan soil. There's no agreements about how the government will move forward here or the shape of democracy, anything like that. It's literally a very simple deal. So the expectations are it will be signed in the coming hours. India, Pakistan, Russia have also been invited to join that signing. We're not sure if they're going to attend, but Timothy Weeks, an Australian professor who was held captive by the Taliban for 3 years, and Anas Haqqani, the younger brother of a key militant leader here, they're there. They were part of the prisoner swap that allowed this deal to happen, and Anas Haqqani actually met Timothy Weeks at the airport. So lots of symbolism going on here. But yeah, it's just the beginning of a process. It's not going to mark the end of the war itself. There will be a lot of difficult steps to come. This still could take many years to sort of really work its way out. This is the beginning of a process, but it's definitely, in the eyes of, I'd have to say, probably most, if not all Afghans, an extremely positive step towards what they hope will be a better future.
You're watching Africa Live on CGT, and we've got a lot more news coming your way after the break, including AU's plan to send 3,000 troops to the Sahel. How will this change the game in the region? And Nigerian officials concerned about the misuse of painkillers in tenderizing food.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. The African Union is set to deploy 3,000 troops to West Africa's Sahel region, where regional forces are struggling to respond to a nearly 8-year onslaught by armed Islamists. The African Union already has a strong presence in the region where insecurity is an everyday reality. CGTN's Gerum Chala has more.
According to information from the African Union, the decision of deploying the 3,000 soldiers to the troubled Sahel region was made during the just concluded African Union Heads of State Assembly. And the rationale behind is the alarming and fatal activities of insurgents and terrorists In Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, as well as Nigeria, the issue of people dying caused by armed attacks is an everyday reality. That is why the additional 3,000 troops are hoped to quell the problem in that region. Already a 5,000-strong G5 force is on the ground in the Sahel. This force is battling armed groups such as Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. Experts say the additional army awaiting a final approval to put boots on the ground will be instrumental in not only combating the anti-peace elements but also return normal life to the conflict-prone region. Group Data CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And to Somalia now, where security remains the biggest concern as African Union troops continue with a planned troop drawdown in the country. An attack earlier this month on an army base raised concerns of just how prepared authorities are to take over security responsibilities from AMISOM. CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo reports from Mogadishu.
AMISOM Force Commander is touring army positions along the border between Somalia and Kenya. The multinational peacekeeping force is implementing a directive by the UN Security Council that seeks a reduction in the number of African Union troops assisting Somalia in ending decades-long Al-Shabaab's insurgency.
The main agenda is drawdown. Based on the UN Security Council resolution 2019, already they decided 1,000 drawdown. How we conduct the general security situation and the next future operation. All sectors, we have clear how we conduct the next operation.
Under an agreed plan endorsed by the international community, AMISOM is required to conduct gradual handover to Somali forces, conduct offensives, secure main supply routes, and reduce the threat posed by the militant group.
You do not want the sacrifices that has been made to be fruitless. Locations that we recovered 7 years, 10 years ago, you don't want to hand over to Al-Shabaab easily. But I think it will not get to that because of our strong partnership. AMISOM and federal government have made a lot of progress in this area, and we have been working together in a very smooth way.
African Union mission to the country says the plan is in motion and the reduction was done during troop rotation. All AMISOM troop contributing countries reduced the number of soldiers on the ground. The force spokesperson says that all forward operating bases are intact and no vacuum was created. The country's army has been effective in capturing and holding towns in recent years, but an attack earlier this month on an army base in the lower Sahel region has raised concerns on Somalia's ability to go it alone.
And El Salini is the only and one of the few bases that the Somali forces are holding on ground. But unfortunately, they have been receiving very serious assaults and lost a lot of soldiers and morale. So I think El Salini could be the case, the test case for Somalia to prove that the exit AMISOM is possible or not.
A major push is underway in the Middle Juba region as Jubaland forces, backed by the National Army and US aerial firepower, has reduced Al-Shabaab's capability to mount deadly attacks. Analysts, however, warn that tough measures must be put in place to ensure hard-won gains are not reversed. Abdulaziz Billo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Now, in light of the recent reports that AMISOM plans a drawdown of troops from Somalia, CGTN's Isabel Nakiria had an exclusive interview with Uganda's military spokesperson, Brigadier Richard Karamira, on the UPDF's position. Let's take a listen.
You are withdrawing troops from the AMISOM base in Somalia. Just let us know how the plans are moving.
We are still in Somalia. We remain in Somalia until the conditions are such that our withdrawal will not leave a gap in the security of the country. We'll still be in Somalia until we have reached a point where we are sure that The gains that we have made since 2007 when deployed as AMISOM cannot be reversed. We have achieved a lot since 2007 when we deployed. Somalia is definitely a better country than it was many years back. Of course, there was a resolution by the United Nations Security Council talking about the drawdown of troops of AMISOM. A committee was set up that discussed that matter further in Mogadishu.
Now, since the drawdown began, this is going to be the second drawdown by Ugandan troops. And you know, Uganda has had the bulk of troops in Somalia. Haven't there been an impact, like increased attacks in certain areas that some of these soldiers that had occupied the region were?
No, these are the factors we definitely must always consider, that the attacks are still there. These drawdowns must be very calculative. Where there's drawdown, that drawdown needs to be backed up by other multipliers such as combat aircrafts. Uganda will soon be deploying our Air Force to be part of the elements in support of the mission. So this will have definitely a multiplier effect. We'll be able to move our troops swiftly in case of need. We'll be able to resupply them in areas that are a bit far and also not safe to travel on the ground. We'll be able to evacuate our casualties if any, and rapidly. So this is a good move towards reinforcing and enabling our troops to be more effective.
Concerns have emerged as to how Somalia plans to conduct a popular vote after the passing of a crucial electoral law last week. From Mogadishu, CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo tells us more.
Last week, Somalia approved an electoral law that will allow the country's public to elect their leaders directly, a first for the country in 5 decades. The move has been welcomed by the public and the country's international partners, but there are concerns on how the popular vote will take place with security challenges and lack of political consensus.
While an important step, the new law regrettably does not address many outstanding questions necessary to implement the code. These questions relate to the locations of constituencies, how to guarantee 30% of seats for women, and the modalities to enable Somalis from across the country to participate.
To address the political impasses, the top UN diplomat has urged stakeholders to convene in order to address Somalia's political future. The new law has received criticism from opposition politicians who view it as a plan by the government to delay the elections in order to seek mandate extension.
Meanwhile, the federal president and federal member state leaders have not met together as a group since May 2019. The protracted absence of a broad political consensus on the way forward in 2020 remains a threat to further progress.
However, the new law enjoys wide support among the public. A move to one-person, one-vote elections means a shift from the elders-based selection of recent political cycles to direct voting by the country's public. The country has 5 regional administrations, but 2 are at loggerheads with the federal government, named Puntland and Jubaland. The central government in Mogadishu has failed to acknowledge the election of Ahmed Mohamed Islam as Jubaland's leader, while Puntland is in dispute with the federal government over key legislations, including resource-sharing agreements.
Based on the reality on the ground, one person, one vote will not be easy to achieve. The government is in no position to conduct the exercise. There is no consensus on the political spectrum. However, elections will take place, but it must be one that is agreed upon by all parties involved.
Parliamentary elections are scheduled for the end of the year, followed by presidential polls in early 2021. The current president, Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo, hasn't formally announced his intention to run for office again, but already opposition leaders are forming alliances in a bid to come up with a candidate, one who will challenge President Farmajo at the ballot box. Abdulaziz Bilon, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
And to Nigeria now, where Health officials are raising concerns over the popularity of a cooking practice that uses the paracetamol painkiller as an ingredient. The widely available drug is intended to relieve pain and reduce fevers, but some Nigerians are using it to tenderize meat. Ifeok Etang reports from Jos, northern Nigeria.
Madeline Williams has come to this pharmacy to buy some paracetamol. Although she doesn't have any of the aches and pains the drug is designed to treat, she's using it for something else. The mother of two is using paracetamol as an ingredient in her cooking.
I put paracetamol into the meat when cooking it. It makes the meat get soft quickly. This will help me save my kerosene, charcoal, and firewood.
Madeline is not the only one catching on to the new trend. The Nigerian Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC, says that a rising number of food vendors across the country are also using the drug to tenderize their meats to avoid the long hours of cooking and save costs. Health experts say using paracetamol to soften meat has dangerous implications.
When you subject paracetamol to the process of cooking, it is converted to a more poisonous byproduct than that produced during the normal process which paracetamol goes through when it is broken down in the liver. Now, this very poisonous product is what is responsible for the damage to the liver, to the kidney, and eventually to the heart.
Despite the prevalence of the practice, many food vendors deny usage of paracetamol in their cooking.
About 25 million people suffered from kidney failure in 2018, and with the current rise in illicit cooking practices, there are fears the numbers could be higher.
This beef vendor says cooking with the wrong kinds of meat might be part of the problem.
There are animals that are meant for farming. Their skin are very tough. There are animals that are fattened for consumption. Those ones that are made for consumption, you see them very light. But because of Nigeria poverty level, the restaurant people, they look good, they go for cheaper one.
Nutritionists in Nigeria are advocating for healthier ways to tenderizing meat.
Safer options of cooking meat are to either use the pressure cooker, which is fast, or you could soak your meat, alternatively marinate it in vinegar or citrus fruit juices like orange juice, lemon or lime juice.
NAFDAC says it is conducting sensitization programs to enlighten Nigerians on the health hazards of cooking with paracetamol. For Williams and other Nigerians tenderizing meat like this, possible long-term health effects may not be worth the risk. Ifeok Etang, CGTN, Jos, Nigeria.
And we've got your business news coming up next in just a little while. Here's a look at the headlines. Eastern Africa caught in a dilemma over locust control measures in densely populated areas. And Nigerian artist turns plastic waste into trendy fashion. Welcome back. The Food and Agriculture Organization says the desert locust invasion in East Africa remains extremely alarming. This follows the widespread breeding of locusts in the region, with new swarms expected in the coming weeks. CGTN's Wilkester Nyabo has more.
John Mwangi is a farmer from Laikipia County, which is located in central Kenya. He is a very disturbed man. A swarm of desert locusts has landed on his farmland.
I have to get worried because I have got nothing else to do if my crop is going to be eaten up. This means it has about 3.5 months to go before it will be harvested. So at that stage, if they just flock there, that will be the end of everything.
John's fear is not unreasonable. His story reflects the tough situation most farmers here are faced with. To address this threat to food security, the Laikipia County government has embarked on aerial sprays to deal with the destructive insects.
We were able to spray them by plane because in that region we don't have a lot of people and animals. So we were able to eradicate it as fast as they came.
Aerial spraying, however, poses a risk of polluting the environment, especially in a densely populated area like Laikipia County.
There are so many people living around these places. They are small-scale holder farmers, and the planes cannot come and spray around this area.
This has left the county government with no option but to resort to ground spraying, but that too comes with its own challenges.
The other challenge is that the pumps that we are provided for, as you can see, most of them are on the trees, and the trees are a bit high for us. So it's a bit challenging to come and do the spraying with the hard pumps.
The Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that a small swarm covering 1 square kilometer can eat the same amount of food in one day as 35,000 people. The locust plague is causing inestimable damage across Eastern Africa, with most governments in a dilemma on which methods to use to deal with the destructive pests. East Africa stares at an imminent food shortage. Bulkisanyabo, CGTN.
An artist in Nigeria has figured out a way to raise awareness about the damage of plastic waste on the environment while breaking even in the world of fashion. He turns what may look like dirt to you into fashionable items. CGTN's Terry Wangari has that story.
This is Adeyemi Emmanuel. He's a visual artist from Lagos, Nigeria. Last year, he began collecting bits of discarded plastic and within days created a backpack. Seeing a way to raise environmental awareness in fashion-conscious Nigeria, in November he launched a line of bags, wallets and gift boxes called Eco.
I started experimenting with them. I just keyed my old mind into just creating something out of that waste. So I just played around with it, and I just found myself making it as chips and laying them on the bags, and I felt it made sense and other people too should have it.
Plastic waste in the form of discarded bags, food and drink packaging is rampant in Lagos. Plastic bags are already banned elsewhere in Africa. Kenya has one of the toughest laws in the world, with the production or sale of plastic bags punishable by up to 4 years in prison or fines of $40,000. But in Nigeria, where the median age is 19 and the cultural influence of artists can be seen in the success of the Nollywood film industry and Afrobeats music scene, Emmanuel saw fashion as a way to make an impact.
In Nigeria here, it's a major challenge because everybody wake up in the morning, Monday morning especially, everybody are quick to just leave the house and you buy a bottle of Coke and your gala, you finish it and you don't want to keep dirt on you, throw it out. Most people do that because at times I do take the public transport and I just for me to see that action, I'm like, okay, more source of inspiration for like, let me just keep doing this thing. I think I'm doing the right thing.
Nigeria has several environmental laws that are simply not being enforced, so raising awareness via art and fashion is a step in the right direction.
These are some of the things that we find every time we have our beach cleanup every last Saturday of the month. Some of the aquatic animals have started to use it as a habitat.
Emmanuel hopes his products will fuel transformational conversations.
Even the people that give these materials to me encourage me. They always want me to just come and pick it and just go away with it because I'm relieving them off some few change that would save them and keep their business still going. Because they're just, at the end of the day, it's all joy. It's all joy. And even on my part, and I'm still making money from waste, come on. It's a big joy for me too still. This is one of the bags I've made.
The bags sell for between $22 to $83 via Emmanuel's Instagram account, where his creations are seen and shared by his 10,000 followers. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Yeah.
South African economist Kevin Ling says he is impressed by the speed with which China responded to the coronavirus outbreak, as well as its efforts to revitalize the world's second largest economy. He says he firmly believes that China has the ability to quickly resume economic development.
There's no doubt that China's ability to react to all kinds of different events is impressive, and that reflects the central control of their government, the way in which the government is integrated into most parts of the economy, and the ability for the government to direct and to implement policy changes is very impressive. So the world has obviously globalized substantially over the last 10 to 15 years, and China has become a much more significant participation in the world economy. It's up at about 16% of world GDP. And the linkages between China and the rest of the world are extensive. At the same time, I think that the Chinese authorities will be looking to implement a range of stimulatory policy measures. They're mostly going to be fiscal in nature, where government is applying various resources to boost infrastructure spending and other types of growth programs. And I think based on history, again, that response can be very effective. And therefore, the view is that when we get to the second quarter of this year, you'll find China rebound quite substantially.
And we're not done just yet. The news continues on Africa Live. Here's a look at what's ahead. A young South African woman makes history as leader and owner of an orchestra.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's go to South Africa now, where a young woman conductor is hitting all the right notes. Offensive Pitse is writing her name in musical history as the first black woman to own and lead an orchestra. She's done it all on her own. CGTN's Julie Shire brings us her story.
Offensive Pitse's prowess and love for classical music is evident as she leads her 40-piece orchestra. Her passion was ignited when she picked up her first musical instrument at 12. A calling she believes comes from her late grandfather.
There's a lot of his teachings and history and that I would hear from my mom, my uncles. So it almost like I knew him, but we never met. So his love for music and what he would do and how he started his own band, how he would conduct using a twig, you know, and his stern approach to everything that he used to do. It's the poetry and the spiritual significance of it all. It's like, I never really met you, but it's almost like you passed on this baton to me. And I have this huge responsibility to sort of like carry out that story.
Pitse's architectural background helped her build and fund her orchestra one piece at a time. She handpicked every member of the group, which has grown tenfold since starting out with just 4 people.
Members of my orchestra and my choir come from the most disenfranchised of communities, right? And for me, it has always been to validate their dreams. You know, I look at some of them who come from Katlehong, for example, which is a township in the east of Johannesburg, and they still use the long drop toilet system. You know, and they come to rehearsal and they sing a piece by Pavarotti, and it's just like, this is crazy, you know.
For Offensive, it's not just about uplifting herself, but also the many young South Africans who are part of her ensemble.
For so many reasons, I wonder who.
Also having them believe that because they've never been told that they are good enough, in as much as they sing and do, you know, as well as they do, they've never been told that they are good enough. They've never been told that they can dream far beyond the ghetto. So for me, that responsibility was to ensure that they do get to that level of exceeding as blacks, and that for me is what black excellence is. It's not, I'm not trying to make them millionaires or anything like that. That will come secondary, but to show them that they actually deserve this.
The fearless young conductor dreams of one day leading her team of talented musicians to the Sydney Opera House, which is known for its architectural splendor and musical excellence. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
A group of young Egyptians has taken the initiative to plant trees across the country. Now, through social media, they invite volunteers and encourage others to grow fruit trees. The program is not only reducing Egypt's carbon footprint, it also is improving nutrition. Here's Adel El Maroui with more.
Carrying their fruit trees seedlings, these young Egyptians are volunteering for a greener future. It's an initiative called Shaggarha, Arabic for plant trees. And in just 4 years, they say they've planted about 100,000 trees.
The initiative aims to spread the culture of planting fruit trees in public places and schools instead of decorative trees. We're also encouraging planting balconies and rooftops to produce vegetables and medicinal herbs. Finally, we want to create awareness about sustainable development and climate change.
New Egyptian cities built in the desert are their attraction sites. In the ground, they stick what in several years would bring fruits of joys to residents here.
We chose new cities because the pollution there is still low, and in the future, these trees would help. We also want to make sure that there is care services for the trees that we plant, so we usually coordinate with the municipalities.
They plant citrus, pomegranate, olives and moringa, trees that can sustain the climate and irrigation conditions in most parts of Egypt. When it started, Shaggarha had very little impact. Today, the initiative enjoys more than 200,000 followers.
I knew about Shaggarha from the Facebook. Then I contacted Omar. He was very friendly and he told me about the coming events. I volunteered with Shaggarha over 3 times for now. It's a very beautiful experience. We plant trees, fruit trees, and I find it very nice and very useful for the communities, especially for the unprivileged communities.
The best thing is that we are volunteering with our time and effort. We are investing in something that will benefit people and animals. That's the brilliance of planting trees.
The awareness it has created about the environment has crossed the Egyptian borders. 5 Arab countries have organized events in coordination with that inspiring initiative. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Guess what? We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Here's a sneak peek at the headline. In sports, Al Ahly take on Mamelodi Sundowns in a repeat of last year's quarterfinals. Let's get started with African football. Egyptian club Al Ahly are all set to host Mamelodi Sundowns of South Africa